Makes Me Wanna Holler by Nathan McCall. Chapter 38, Yankees. In the South, the past is not dead. The past is not even past. William Faulkner. Old Danny Boy was right about one thing. Once I became more receptive to some of the friendlier whites at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, they proved to be okay. Before leaving for Africa, he pulled my coat to the cool ones and to the closet racists. Some of them were as sincere as any bloods I knew. One, an editor, engaged me in long talks that were as deep and funny as those between Danny and me. My interaction with whites eased some of the tension I felt in the newsroom. It wasn't so traumatic being at work around them, and I even loosened up enough to begin going to lunch and to drinks after work with some. After I got to know some of the whites pretty well, I told one of my homeboys one day, "You know, there are some good white folks out there." He shook his head and looked away, like he was pondering it. Yeah, there are some good ones, but the ones that are bad are really bad. We laughed ourselves silly. A lot of the pressure I felt to leave the system was eased by some major personnel changes at the paper. In an effort to convert the Journal-Constitution into a world-class newspaper, the owners went out and recruited some of the top journalists in the country to run it. They started with a guy named Bill Kovac, who had served as the Washington bureau chief of the New York Times and who had a reputation as a journalist of impeccable skills and integrity. After pulling together his own team of people from the Times, Kovac came in right away and reworked the entire paper, changing its appearance and writing style. Kovac's arrival virtually split the newsroom into two camps. There were those who were happy to see somebody come in, break up the entrenched good old boy system, and raise our journalistic standards. And there were the Deep South compatriots who didn't like change and could stomach it even less at the hands of a Yankee. I heard that term a lot in Atlanta. Whites in and around that area still mourned the loss of the Civil War, as if it had ended only a few months earlier. And they strongly resented outsiders, especially the Yankees they deemed responsible for shattering their splendid plantation culture. They glorified the days of white-run cotton plantations and black handkerchief-head nincompoops depicted in Gone with the Wind. It occurred to me that if these white people hadn't yet gotten over a war fought more than 100 years ago, they hadn't even begun to deal in their heads with modern racism and equality. Watching some of those good old boys huddling conspiratorially in their clusters, grumbling all the time about them damn Yankees coming in and taking over, you would have thought they were planning to fight the fucking Civil War all over again. Some got mad and quit. Kovac fired others. It was interesting seeing white people warring against each other like that. I enjoyed watching the carnage. Kovac's arrival revealed something to me about whites in the Deep South that I hadn't fully understood before. They have a deeply rooted inferiority complex that really does stem partly from that stupid war. I figured those northern whites must have worked a mojo number on their minds and humiliated them so badly that they passed that humiliation down through generations in the same way black folks had passed along the humiliation of slavery. What really got to the good old boys was that Kovac's actions indicated that the old bunch running the paper was incompetent, which I guess supported the myth of the dumb hick Southerner. I concluded that Southern whites' inferiority complex may be the reason they cling so desperately to racism. They need to feel they are superior to somebody in the world. Kovac didn't just upset the people working under him. He managed to piss off his bosses just as much. I think his bosses assumed he'd come in and be the typical executive newspaper hypocrite. Talk about impartiality and aggressiveness in journalism and overlook the newsworthy sins of powerful people who bought advertising. But Kobach refused to get cozy with the powerful. When an executive from Coca-Cola, one of the most influential corporations in Atlanta, invited Kobach to dinner, Kobach turned him down. That upset top management terribly. When that happened, I became convinced that he was one of the few white managers on that level who actually believed in the journalistic ideals he preached. Others talked a good game, but he used the rhetoric of journalism like Reagan and Bush used the rhetoric of patriotism to manipulate and deceive. Kobach's arrival was poetic justice for blacks in the newsroom. For a while, we walked around gloating with looks on our faces that said, well, what do you know? These crackers were so persistent in trying to prove us incompetent, now come to find out they were faking the funk. They don't take it so well when the tables are turned. Compared to the tough times we had under the old regime, blacks and women were in hog heaven after Kobach got there. We got opportunities to do things that had been closed options before. I didn't know whether or not he was less racist or sexist than anyone else, but he seemed to offer equal opportunities, and that's all any of us could ask. Clearly, Kobach was smart enough to know that black journalists were valued assets in a largely black city. As soon as he took over, he promoted some blacks to the city desk and made sure others were included on major stories done by the paper. He promoted me to City Hall bureau chief. When he began utilizing blacks, some whites in the newsroom started mumbling that affirmative action shit again. But I knew what that was about. I knew the real deal. Some white people are so accustomed to operating at a competitive advantage that when the playing field is level, they feel handicapped. In a short span of time that Kobach was at the Journal-Constitution, I got to travel out of town on more assignments than I had in my entire time in journalism. I went to Miami to cover a mayor's conference and to New Orleans for the Republican National Convention. I even went on a trip to Europe with Andy Young and a group of other politicians and businessmen in a trade delegation seeking to attract businesses to Atlanta. I hadn't been out in the country since I was 4 when the family lived in Morocco. First, we went to Switzerland, where delegation members met and dined Swiss dignitaries and made pitches promoting investment opportunities in Atlanta. Then we caught a train over the Swiss Alps to Milan. There were more tours, luncheons, and dinners. I wrote stories about the trip and sent them in from a laptop computer. I trailed Andy Young everywhere as he dazzled Italian dignitaries with his knowledge of the intimate details of world politics. At various times during the trip, the irony of my being abroad dawned on me. The experience was so far from anything I'd ever imagined I would do that I wonder how I'd gotten there. Sometimes, I stop in the middle of an activity and ask myself, what are you doing here? Only a few years ago, you were in prison. Now here you are in Milan, Italy with Andrew Young. Life is incredible. That dawning was like a quickening of the spirit. When that happened, it seemed my consciousness was suspended and I could feel all the power and wonder of the universe flowing through me. At the end of that trip, the delegation leaders threw a final dinner to celebrate the success of the trade mission. After we ate, the host asked various people to say a few words. Andy spoke and was followed by other delegation members. Then, surprisingly, the host turned to me and said, "Now we would like to hear from our journalist friend." I was speechless. I wondered, should I make some comment as a journalist or speak from the heart? I wanted to speak from the heart to tell them what this experience really meant to me. I wanted to tell them that I had never imagined in my wildest prison dreams that I would get an experience as enriching as this. I wanted to say all that and more, but I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. When I realized that everybody around the table was watching and waiting for me to say something, I choked up even more. They looked at me like they feared something was wrong, like they thought I might be about to have a heart attack and were wondering if someone should call a paramedic. I glanced at Andy. He, too, appeared concerned. Desperate, I forced some words out of my mouth. It probably didn't make sense, but I had to say something. When I finished, there was an eerie silence in the room. Then someone spoke up and rescued the moment, and the celebration continued. I could tell some of the people were embarrassed for me. I was embarrassed for myself. I felt so bad I wanted to get up and bolt from the room. After dinner, I retreated to my room and sulked. How had I allowed that to happen? Why had I not been able to still my nerves and do what I was called upon to do? I felt frustrated, yet I understood why I had choked. I had been called on at precisely one of those moments when I was in the middle of a dawning. Mentally, I had been far away, basking in the splendor of that moment and savoring my connectedness to the universe. This has been the most rewarding of my 6 years as a journalist. I have traveled to Milan, Italy, and Zurich, Switzerland, with Mayor Andrew Young. I went to Miami, Florida for a conference of black mayors and a National Association of Black Journalists convention. I have interviewed for jobs in New York at Black Enterprise magazine. I have also traveled to Richmond, Virginia, and Tennessee. Furthermore, I bolstered my career at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution with strong stories about City Hall, and I am bureau chief over 2 other reporters. These experiences solidify my belief that I can do anything I set my mind to do. The possibilities are boundless. What is also clear to me is that my achievement efforts will be hampered or helped by my mate. I need someone who is goal-oriented, who really knows that dreams are attainable. Although I am married, I look past my wife because she has no sense of direction and she is not motivated enough to even draw upon my resources and drive. For these reasons and more, I must terminate the union. If I don't, I'll face a life of unfulfilled dreams. The sad thing is that we have 2 beautiful children who undoubtedly will suffer some personal deprivations. That pains me, but not more than the prospect of spending the remainder of my days with a woman I neither love nor respect. October 3rd, 1987. Debbie telephoned me in the newsroom just as I was putting on my coat to head out for an interview. "Nathan, this is Debbie. I'm at Georgia Baptist Hospital." "What's the matter?" "It's Maya. She got real sick this morning. I took her to the doctor, and he said he's afraid she may have meningitis. He told me to rush her to the emergency room." As she told me that the doctors were then examining our 2-year-old daughter, her voice broke and she started crying. I rushed out of the newsroom and headed toward the downtown Atlanta hospital. While speeding through traffic, my mind ran the gamut of possibilities. Of course, the thought that haunted me most, the one I refused to think about too hard, was the possibility that Maya would die. I uttered a prayer and struggled to still my nerves. "God, please don't test me this way. I can handle anything but this." I felt that if Maya didn't pull through, I wouldn't make it either. I'd be a walking, breathing, living dead man. I reached the hospital within 15 minutes and found Debbie pacing in the waiting area. We talked with the doctors about Maya's condition, and they told us they would have to conduct tests to determine if she really did have meningitis. They performed the tests and admitted her to the hospital. When we went to her room, she was lying inside a crib with needles in her arms and an oxygen tent surrounding her. The doctor said, "It may be several days before we can get her condition under control." Debbie and I decided that we should be with Maya around the clock. She pulled days, and I went there every night after work. Maya was subdued. She sprang to life, however, whenever I left the room to go to the bathroom or to get a soda. She wailed hysterically until I returned. Some nights, after she had fallen asleep, I sat there in a chair near the crib and stared at that young soul and wondered, how do you get them through life? How do you protect them and minimize their hurts? After nearly a week, Maya's condition improved, and doctors said she would pull through. It turned out that she didn't exactly suffer from meningitis, but had some related condition that could lead to it. We took our daughter home and celebrated her impending health. Debbie and I worked well together when faced with emergencies like that. We got through a brief scare with cancer that she suffered, as well as the many frightening bumps and bruises that children got. It was the calm times we had trouble managing. The times when all was quiet, everyone was healthy, and we were forced to look at each other and acknowledge that there was something vital missing from our marriage. We still argued a lot about everything, how we should celebrate Christmas with the children, her mother's frequent visits and long stays, money problems, me staying out too late at night with Chip and Claxton, my two homeboys. I was constantly reminded of how different we were, even in the way we interacted with other people. Debbie, who worked as a secretary at Emory University, had a few friends she met on the job, but she did most of her socializing with her family and the family of her ex-fiancé who also lived in Atlanta. I met lots of smart and stimulating people through my work and formed new and healthy social networks that I hadn't had in Portsmouth. I cut into a group of people who worked at City Hall, and we often got together on weekends for food, drink, Scrabble, and conversations with our families. Within the group were several women who were intelligent and progressive, the kind of women I enjoyed being around. We'd get into involved debates about politics, current events, books, and other things. Debbie was cordial toward them, but maintained her distance, and she was so quiet when around them that it began to make them and me uncomfortable. Initially, I thought that maybe she suspected I was trying to hit on one of the women in the group, so I encouraged her to get to know them better in hopes that she'd see that the relationships were strictly platonic and legit. Then one night, something happened that showed me that Debbie's hang-ups ran deeper than female jealousy. I took her to a big party being thrown by some black Atlanta politician. All kinds of other politicians and folks from the city's black gentry were there, including one of Andy Young's top assistants. Spotting me, the assistant walked over and I introduced Debbie as my wife. The assistant said, "My pleasure meeting you," and asked her a question to get the conversation going. Debbie just looked at him and smiled sheepishly, like he wasn't talking to her. The guy repeated the question and the reaction was the same. She froze, just like she often had when my City Hall friends were around. I cut in and changed the conversation to try to rescue my wife. I was embarrassed, the assistant was embarrassed, and I'm sure Debbie was embarrassed too. The incident brought home something that I suspected but was unsure of. Debbie was intimidated by intelligent and influential black folks, so much so that she withdrew when around them. That discovery made me reluctant to take her places that required a lot of social mingling. After that, I started going out alone as often as I could, and that heightened tensions even more at home. For me, life at home was a compromise. There were the joys, being there with my children and nurturing them, and the strains of trying to work a marriage doomed from the start. There were moments when family life made me feel serene and in harmony with the natural order of things, but there were too many times when hassles kept me out of sorts. No matter how bad things got, I was determined to hang in there for a while for my children's sake. I had to see to it that they got off to a better and healthier start in life than I had. My parents had done a good job, the best they could, but they came from the old school, a generation that seldom talked to children or got into their heads. I wanted to try a different, more hands-on approach to child rearing. With Monroe, I'd blown that chance to make an early impression. Before going off to prison, I'd always felt like an outsider, neither up to the responsibilities nor entitled to the full rights of a father. But with Ian and Maya, I had a direct in-house impact on how they were being raised. There was a chance to do it right, to instill in Maya a strong sense of herself so that she wouldn't grow up feeling dependent on men. to provide Ian a healthy blueprint of manhood devoid of all that macho bullshit, to show him it's all right to hug and kiss his father and to say, I love you. I was determined they would also be taught to love themselves in their blackness. There were no white dolls or Santas in our house, no pictures of white people on our walls. There were black faces in their children's books and lots of warm, nurturing interaction with their parents. It was just the opposite with their mother and me. We drifted further apart, battling against differences too vast to overcome and heading toward an end that we both knew was near. All right, we've made it to the end of another chapter. Thank you guys for tuning in again, as always. My immediate reaction, I'm thinking about his relationship with his wife, Debbie. And that's why, your foundation of your relationship is so important. You got to be so careful with the woman that you choose to lay down with. Ladies, you have to be careful with the men that you choose to lay down with, because a life can come out of that situation. So now, he's in a situation where he wants to provide his children with a stable background and to do the quote unquote right thing. And, just provide that stability of having a father present in the home. But you can end up doing more damage than harm, more damage than good, if you're in a situation where you don't really love their mother. Children may not be able to express that at a young age, but they definitely feel it. So that's something, just keep in mind. Be careful who you have children with. And, you already have children and you have them with the wrong person. Do your best to keep that relationship as peaceful as possible. And talk to the younger people, the ones who don't have children yet. I remember there was this young guy that I met. He might have been like 20 years old. No, I think he was young. I think he might have been like 18 or 19. But he was talking about, thinking about having a child next year. And I just told him, I said, man, take your time. Having a child it's a lot of responsibility. It can be a burden, and you want to make sure you want to have that child with a woman that you want to spend the rest of your life with. I think it was in the last chapter, another thought that I had, where I was talking about how you have to control the things that your mind thinks about. As soon as Nathan was able to relax in his workplace and not be so caught up on race and thinking that everybody was against him, it turned into a much more positive environment for him. And I know, thinking about, the times that he was in, you can empathize with him why it was hard for him to relax. He was coming up in a different time. It seemed like, okay, maybe all these white people are racist. And that's part of the trick, too. They want you to stay worried about that. Keep that on your mind so you'll get more of it. Something else to note is that, classism is a real thing. The people who are rich, they have a tendency to look down upon people who have less money than them. And that's not different for white people. The rich whites look at the poor whites as, they just poor whites trash. And I know that's not all of them, but, the white people that have little bits of money, they're struggling as well. They do feel like an inferiority complex when they have to see all these wealthy white people living a different lifestyle than them. And in their mind, it makes them think, well, what have I done wrong to where I'm not in this position in life that they're in? Like, I'm white in America. This is supposed to be working for me. So, that anger, that frustration, they turn that towards somebody that they can at least feel better than. Like, there's this saying that, that goes around in the black community that we know about racist white folks, so where they can be like, well, I may be poor, but at least I ain't no nigga. Because it's in their mind, I have to be better than somebody. So even if I'm dirt poor, living in squalor, I'm still ain't no nigga, so I'm at least better than them. And that's a mentality that's, I believe that's starting to be harder and harder for them to really hold on to, especially with the way things are trending. With the advent of social media and the internet, we're able to put out so much more information about ourselves to where even they have to recognize and see, like, dang, a lot of this stuff that we were taught in history about how we were the greatest things ever, well, this isn't true. Oh, you mean to tell me that these black people have been doing all this for so long and we just kind of got on the scene and we haven't really made it to the level that they fell from? Yeah, that's frustrating for them. And it's almost like, it's like a certain amount of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like they can't see it. Like that TV show Ancient Aliens is funny to me because, they'll see all these wonderful monuments built by melanated people and say, well, I know these niggas couldn't have done it, so it must have been aliens. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you check out my ebook, Free Your Mind to Have Peace of Mind. I'm going to leave a link to that. And if you have read it, please leave a review for it on Amazon or let me know in the comments. But as always, I'll see you guys on the next episode of Ron's Library and Ideas. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to be notified for more posts. All right, I'll see y'all soon. Peace.